Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the second part of our story. Let's jump right back in. Ethan sat alone in Liam's secure apartment on the morning of the third day, methodically cleaning a set of surgical tools. His hands had always been steady. It was what had made him an exceptional medic in the field and later a sought-after trauma nurse. Those same hands now prepared instruments not for healing, but for something else entirely. His phone buzzed with a text from Liam. Package delivered. The package was a carefully crafted piece of misinformation, anonymously sent to Volkov, suggesting that Ethan planned to steal the drug shipment that night. It was the final nudge designed to force their hand. Across town, Marcus paced nervously in what had once been Ethan's home office, a space he'd converted into a makeshift command center. Maps of the area were spread across the desk, alongside 3 burner phones and a handgun. Volkov wants us to move the shipment tonight, he told Ava, who stood in the doorway, her face pale. All of it. His contact at the DEA says there might be a raid coming tonight. But you said we had 3 days, Ava whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Plans change. Marcus checked his watch impatiently. The trucks arrive at midnight. We load everything and it's gone by 1 a.m. Then we're in the clear. And Ethan? She asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Marcus's expression darkened. Volkov's men found a lead on where he's hiding. They're handling it. Ava closed her eyes briefly, a flicker of pain crossing her face. Will they kill him? Does it matter? Marcus snapped, his patience wearing thin. He's nothing to you now. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. You're with me. Remember? We're building something here. She pulled away, her gaze hardening. Building what exactly? A life running drugs for Volkov? Is that what you promised when you came back? Don't get self-righteous now, Marcus sneered. You knew what this was when you let me move in. I knew you needed a place to store some merchandise, Ava retorted, her voice rising. I didn't know it was millions in heroin. I didn't know Ethan would be in danger. Marcus laughed harshly, a cruel, dismissive sound. Your husband's a big boy. He made his choice when he threatened me. Outside the house, concealed by the growing dusk, Ethan listened to the argument through a directional microphone. His suspicions about Ava's involvement were being confirmed in real time. Not entirely innocent, but not fully complicit either. Manipulated, certainly. Used, definitely. Not that it changed anything. As darkness fell completely, Ethan moved. While Marcus was occupied with preparations in the basement, Ethan re-entered the house through his secret access point. He made his way silently to the kitchen, where he carefully injected a clear liquid into an open bottle of bourbon Marcus had carelessly left on the counter. The man's habit of drinking straight from the bottle was now a fatal vulnerability. Then, just as silently, Ethan retreated to the woods behind the property. There, he'd prepared a blind, a concealed observation post with a clear view of the house and the service road beyond. From a specialized container, he removed a high-powered rifle with a thermal scope, assembled it with practiced hands, and settled in to wait. At 10:30 p.m., 2 SUVs pulled up to the house. 6 men emerged, Volkov's security team, there to oversee the transfer. They entered the house, where Marcus greeted them tensely. Through Ethan's scope, he could see Ava being instructed to stay upstairs. At 11:15 p.m., Marcus, clearly agitated, took a long pull directly from the bourbon bottle. By 11:30 p.m., he began showing signs of disorientation, touching his head, leaning against furniture for support. At 11:45 p.m., Marcus staggered upstairs, waving off the concerned glances of Volkov's men, claiming he needed to lie down for a few minutes. Ethan watched through his scope as Marcus entered the master bedroom, where Ava appeared startled by his condition. Words were exchanged, heated ones judging by their body language. Then, Marcus collapsed onto the bed, his movements uncoordinated, while Ava backed away towards the door. Perfect timing. Ethan reached for his phone and sent a precomposed text to Agent Miller. Operation in progress. Cole residence. Shipment moving tonight. Then he sent a second text to Liam. Phase 1 complete. Commence Phase 2. Across town, Liam made a call to a number he'd been given. The voice that answered was gruff, professional. "Colonel Davies, sir, this is Walker. Cole says it's time." There was a brief pause. "Understood. Assets are in position." As midnight approached, 3 unmarked vans turned onto the road leading to Ethan's house. Their lights off, moving with precision. Simultaneously, DEA vehicles took up strategic positions near the property. Their lights also extinguished. Agents prepared for a raid, holding their positions on Agent Miller's command. Inside the house, oblivious to the silent encirclement, Volkov's men continued preparations for the shipment transfer. In the master bedroom, Marcus lay immobile, barely conscious, with Ava watching him from the doorway, conflict etched on her face. And in his blind in the woods, Ethan Cole waited for the perfect moment to spring the trap that would destroy everything Marcus and Volkov had built and irrevocably change his own life. At precisely midnight, 3 delivery trucks pulled onto the service road behind Ethan's house. Through his scope, Ethan watched as Volkov's men moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a security perimeter before signaling the trucks to approach the house. In the master bedroom, Marcus lay motionless on the bed, his breathing shallow, his eyes unfocused. The compound Ethan had created was working exactly as designed, paralyzing, but not lethal. Not yet, anyway. Ava paced the room, repeatedly checking her phone, torn between fear and a desperate instinct for self-preservation. Ethan pressed the transmit button on his radio. "Bravo team, status?" "In position," came Colonel Davies's clipped response. 12 men, all with NVGs, awaiting your signal. "Hold for phase 2, Ethan replied. Below, Volkov's men had begun moving the crates from the house to the first truck. The operation was smooth, professional. These weren't street-level dealers. They were experienced smugglers who had done this many times before. Ethan adjusted his position slightly, focusing on the lead truck. Through his scope, he could make out the driver. None other than Dmitry Volkov, Victor's nephew. The fact that he was personally overseeing the transport spoke volumes about the shipment's importance. Perfect. Ethan picked up his phone and made a call to Agent Miller. "The shipment is moving now," he said when she answered, his voice calm and steady. 3 trucks heading east on the service road towards Interstate 40. Armed escort, at least 6 men. "Who is this?" Miller demanded, her voice sharp with urgency. "How did you—" "The information you provided was accurate," Ethan cut her off. "Now I'm giving you the window to make your move. 5 minutes, then they're gone." He ended the call and immediately radioed Colonel Davies. "Execute phase 2. Countdown starts now." What happened next was a precisely orchestrated symphony of chaos. First, 2 small explosive charges detonated on the service road, far enough from the house to avoid injury but close enough to effectively block the truck's escape route. Next, Colonel Davies's team, all former Special Forces operators, emerged from the woods on the opposite side, creating the impression of a pincer movement. They fired over the heads of Volkov's men, driving them back towards the house. Simultaneously, DEA agents, responding to what they believed was an imminent escape, accelerated their raid timeline. They approached from the front of the house, announcing their presence with blaring sirens and blinding floodlights. Caught between what they perceived as 2 separate forces, Volkov's men made the predictable choice. They retreated into the house with the drugs, prepared to defend their valuable shipment. Inside, Ava heard the commotion and rushed to the window, panic contorting her features as she saw the flashing lights and heard the shouting. She grabbed her phone, dialing frantically. Ethan watched it all unfold through his scope, timing his next move carefully. When the last of Volkov's men had retreated into the house, he pressed his radio again. "Phase 3. I'm moving in." Using the confusion as cover, Ethan approached the house from a blind spot he'd identified earlier, a section of the property not visible from either the front approach or the service road. He entered through the same basement access point he'd used before, moving silently up the stairs into the main house. The interior was chaos. Volkov's men had taken defensive positions, some facing the front where DEA agents were shouting commands to surrender, others watching the back where they believed another threat existed. None of them noticed Ethan as he slipped into the hallway leading to the bedrooms. He found Ava in the master bedroom, still on her phone, her back to the door. Marcus remained on the bed, conscious but immobile, his eyes widening in recognition and a dawning fear as Ethan entered. They're surrounding the house. Ava was saying into her phone, her voice strained. Marcus is sick, or drugged, or something. I don't know what to. She turned and froze, the phone slipping from her fingers as she saw Ethan. Hello, Ava, he said calmly, his gaze steady. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. From below came the sound of breaking glass and shouted commands as the DEA began their entry. Not much time, Ethan continued, stepping further into the room. He glanced at Marcus. I see you've been taking care of my replacement. Ethan? Ava finally managed, her voice a choked whisper. What did you do? I created a scenario, he replied, as if discussing something mundane like the weather. Volkov believes his operation was betrayed from within. The DEA believes they're stopping a major drug shipment. And you too. He looked between Ava and the paralyzed Marcus. You're caught in the middle. You set us up, she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. No different than what you did to me, Ethan replied, moving to the bed and looking down at Marcus, whose eyes blazed with helpless rage. Though I was more efficient about it. Shouts and the sound of a struggle echoed from downstairs. They didn't have much time. The DA will be here any moment, Ethan said. They'll find Volkov's drugs, Marcus's fingerprints all over everything. And you, Ava, the homeowner who let it all happen. I didn't know, she protested, tears forming in her eyes. I swear I didn't know what he was really doing until it was too late. Maybe, Ethan acknowledged, his voice devoid of emotion. But that's between you and the federal prosecutors now. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a syringe. What is that? Ava asked, backing away, her voice trembling. Insurance, Ethan replied. The compound already in Marcus's system will be undetectable in an autopsy. This, he held up the syringe, will cause his system to shut down completely. By the time they find him, it will look like a heart attack brought on by stress. You're going to kill him. Ava's voice rose in panic. Ethan, you can't. You can't. Can't I? His voice was deadly quiet. He took my home, my wife, my life. And for what? To use it as a way station for his drug operation. To feel like he'd won some game I didn't even know we were playing. Marcus made a strangled sound, trying desperately to move, to speak, but the paralytic held him firmly in its grip. Footsteps pounded on the stairs. The DA was working their way through the house, room by room. Ethan looked at Ava, really looked at her, searching for the woman he'd married. All he saw was fear and self-interest. Make your choice, Ava, he said, holding out the syringe. You can inject him yourself and tell the DEA you found him like this when they broke in, or you can let him live, and when he recovers, he'll tell them everything about your involvement. She stared at the syringe, conflict etched on her face, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered, her voice broken. I'm not doing anything, Ethan replied coldly. I'm giving you the choice I never had. The footsteps were at the end of the hallway now. Ava's hand trembled as she reached for the syringe. 3 days later, Marcus Thorne was found dead in the guest bedroom of what had once been Ethan and Ava Cole's home. The official cause was cardiac arrest, likely brought on by the stress of the DEA raid and his subsequent arrest. Despite the best efforts of prison medical staff, he couldn't be resuscitated. The same day, in an interview room at the federal building downtown, Ava Cole sat across from Agent Sarah Miller, her eyes red and swollen from sleepless nights in custody. Let me understand this, Miller said, reviewing her notes. You claim you had no knowledge that the crates contained heroin? That you believed they were legitimate merchandise for Mr. Thorne's business? Yes, Ava insisted, her voice hoarse. Marcus told me they were specialized exercise equipment prototypes. That's why they needed to be stored somewhere secure. And you never looked inside these crates? never questioned why they required armed guards to transport. Miller's expression remained skeptical. Ava's gaze dropped to the table. I started to suspect something was wrong, but by then, I was afraid of what Marcus might do if I asked too many questions. The DA's office is prepared to charge you as an accessory, Mrs. Cole. The penalties for trafficking this quantity of heroin are severe. I've told you everything I know, Ava said desperately. What else can I do? Cooperation might help your case, Miller said, her tone measured. But we need more than just Marcus Thorne. We need Volkov. Ava's phone had started ringing incessantly moments after news of Marcus's death broke. 87 missed calls from a blocked number before the DEA had taken her phone as evidence. She knew who it was, knew what he wanted. If I help you with Volkov, she said carefully, her mind racing. What kind of deal could I get? Meanwhile, across town, Ethan sat in a different interview room with 2 military investigators from the Criminal Investigation Division. His hands were folded calmly on the table as the investigators reviewed their file. Colonel Davies confirms your account, Mr. Cole, the lead investigator said. He states that you contacted him with information about a drug operation being run by a Russian national named Viktor Volkov. That's correct, Ethan replied, his voice even. And you learned about this operation how? Through my wife, Ethan explained, his gaze steady. When I found my clothes in garbage bags on the lawn after working a double shift, my wife texted, "We needed your closet for my ex-boyfriend's things." When I asked how long he was staying, they both laughed. Permanently, of course. He paused, allowing the brutality of the moment to sink in. I left quietly. 3 days later, I learned that Marcus Thorne, the ex-boyfriend, was using my house to store drugs for Volkov. I reported what I knew to Colonel Davies, who agreed to assist in the operation. The second investigator leaned forward. The problem, Mr. Cole, is the timing. You reported this to Colonel Davies after you had already confronted Marcus Thorne, at a diner, threatening to expose his operation. Ethan's expression remained impassive. I needed confirmation before involving the military. The confrontation was a calculated risk to gather more information. And your wife's involvement? I believe she was manipulated, Ethan said carefully. Whether she was fully aware of what was happening in our house is for the courts to decide. The investigators exchanged glances. Mr. Cole, were you present at the house during the DEA raid? A moment of silence stretched between them. No, Ethan replied evenly. I was at Liam Walker's apartment. He can confirm my whereabouts. The lead investigator closed his file. For now, we're concluding our investigation into your involvement. The DEA has primary jurisdiction over the drug trafficking case. As Ethan was escorted out, he passed the room where Ava was still being interviewed. Their eyes met briefly through the glass, hers pleading, his unreadable. That evening, in Liam's apartment, Ethan watched the local news report on Marcus Thorne's death in custody. Heart failure, Liam commented, taking a swig of beer. Convenient. Ethan said nothing, his attention fixed on the screen as it showed footage of Viktor Volkov being led away in handcuffs. The result of Ava's cooperation. You never told me what really happened in that bedroom, Liam said carefully, his gaze searching Ethan's face. With Ava and Marcus. Ethan turned from the television, his expression blank. Does it matter? I guess not, Liam conceded. But Ava's calls, 87 of them before the feds took her phone. She's trying to reach you. Let her try, Ethan replied coldly. She might take a deal, testify against Volkov for reduced charges. She could be out in a few years. Ethan stood and moved to the window. The city lights spread before him like a field of stars, each one representing lives entangled in their own dramas of love, betrayal, and consequences. It doesn't change anything, he said finally, his voice low and flat. What was broken can't be repaired. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Agent Miller. We need to speak tomorrow. 9 a.m. Liam read the message over his shoulder. What do you think she wants? Ethan pocketed the phone. Closure. Something few of us ever really get. 1 year later, The small cabin in the Montana wilderness was exactly what Ethan had been looking for. Remote, self-sufficient, with a view of mountains that reminded him of Afghanistan, though without the constant threat of violence. Here, the silence was broken only by the wind whispering through the pines and the occasional cry of an eagle. He sat on the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the distant peaks gold. A year had passed since the Volkov case had wrapped up, a year since he'd walked away from his old life entirely. Volkov had received a 30-year sentence in federal prison, his entire operation dismantled thanks to Ava's testimony. Ava herself had been sentenced to 5 years, eligible for parole in 3, a generous deal considering the evidence against her. Ethan had never visited her, had never responded to her letters, which arrived with steadfast regularity despite his silence. They sat in a box in his cabin, unopened but not discarded, a testament to something he couldn't quite name. The crunch of tires on gravel announced a visitor, unusual for a place so deliberately isolated. Ethan set down his coffee and watched as a government SUV wound its way up the dirt road. Agent Miller. He'd been expecting her, though not quite this soon. She stepped out of the vehicle, looking out of place in her crisp suit against the rugged landscape. "Beautiful spot," she commented as she approached the porch. "Though a long way from civilization." "That's the point," Ethan replied, gesturing to a second chair. "Coffee?" She nodded, taking the seat while Ethan went inside to pour her a cup. When he returned, she was surveying the valley below. "I could get used to this view," she admitted, accepting the coffee. "But you won't," Ethan said, his gaze direct. "You're here on business." Miller sipped her coffee, considering him over the rim. "Volkov's organization has been dismantled, his assets seized, his associates prosecuted. A complete success by any measure. And yet, you're here." She set down her mug. "Marcus Thorne's autopsy has been reviewed. The initial finding of natural causes has been questioned." Ethan's expression remained calm. "By whom?" "By me," Miller replied, her gaze unwavering. "There were inconsistencies, subtle ones. Nothing that would stand up in court, but enough to make me curious about what really happened in that bedroom during the raid. About whether Ava Cole is serving time for more than just drug trafficking." She fixed him with a penetrating stare. Ethan held her gaze. "Are you here to arrest me, Agent Miller?" "No," she said after a moment, her voice quiet. "I'm here to close a file, to satisfy my own curiosity. And if you don't like the answers..." Miller looked out at the mountains again. "Sometimes justice and the law don't perfectly align. Marcus Thorne was a violent criminal who destroyed lives for profit. If his death wasn't entirely natural..." She shrugged, a hint of understanding in her eyes. "I can live with the ambiguity." Ethan studied her, recognizing something in her pragmatism that echoed his own military experience. The understanding that the world rarely offered clean moral choices. "The official record stands," he said finally, his voice firm. "Anything else is speculation." Miller nodded slowly. "Fair enough." She reached into her jacket and withdrew an envelope. "Your ex-wife is being released next month. Good behavior, cooperation, the usual factors. She asked me to give you this." Ethan made no move to take the envelope. "She's dying," Miller added quietly, her gaze softening slightly. "Cancer. Advanced stage." The Bureau arranged compassionate release. The news landed like a physical blow, unexpected in its impact. Ethan had imagined many futures, many possible endings to their story, but not this. Reluctantly, he took the envelope. "Thank you for the coffee," Miller said, standing. "And for your service, both military and otherwise." After she'd gone, Ethan sat for a long time with the unopened envelope, turning it over in his hands as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Finally, he tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Ava and Ethan on their wedding day, laughing, unaware of the camera. On the back, in Ava's handwriting, "I made my choice that night. I chose wrong. I'm sorry." No plea for forgiveness, no request to visit, just an acknowledgement of the truth they both knew. Ethan returned to the cabin and placed the photograph in the box with the unopened letters. Then, he packed a small bag with essential supplies and locked the cabin door behind him. The mountains called, as they always did when his mind needed clearing. He would hike to the ridge, make camp, and watch the stars appear one by one in a sky untainted by city lights. In that vastness, he would contemplate what remained after revenge had burned itself out. Not forgiveness, certainly, but perhaps something like peace. As he shouldered his pack and set off on the familiar trail, Ethan thought about choices, those made in moments of crisis, those made in cold calculation, and those yet to come. He thought about Ava, dying in a hospital somewhere, carrying the weight of her decisions to the end. He thought about Marcus, whose arrogance had cost him everything. And he thought about himself, a man who had walked away from bloodshed only to create his own version of justice when the world demanded it. The path steepened, his breathing deepened, and behind him, the cabin grew smaller with distance. Ahead lay the wilderness, indifferent to human dramas, offering neither judgment nor absolution, only the next step forward, and the one after that. Ethan Cole kept walking. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.